Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. There is a particular quality to the first morning back after a summer break. The laptop opens, and for about 90 seconds, everything is calm. And then the inbox finishes loading. Somewhere in there is the thread that has been running for 11 days without you. There are the 3 decisions you promised yourself you would make in September, back when September sounded like a different country. There is the person who covered for you, who now needs an hour to hand it all back to you. There is a board pack due, a hiring loop half open, and something about this staging environment that nobody wanted to put in writing to you. And you have not had a coffee yet. Most of us have a story about a return to work that went badly, and it usually has the same shape. We come back with real intent, we look at the accumulated stack of everything that waited for us, and we go straight at it. We work hard, we work fast, and 2 or 3 weeks later, we come up for air with the strange feeling that we have been extremely busy and have moved nothing forward. I want to talk about that this week because I very nearly did it to myself this summer, and because the way we come back into work in the last week of August has more influence over the rest of our year than almost anything else we will do in September. There is a version of this where we arrive well. It has a particular geometry to it, and once we can see that geometry, it stops being luck and becomes something we choose. I'm Adam Horner, CTO coach and founder of the CTO Playbook. You can explore coaching, cohorts, and how to stay up to date at thectoplaybook.com, where we help you build your own playbook for your path at your pace. If you're heading back into work about now, this one is built for the next 2 weeks. There is something practical at the end of it that takes about half an hour for you to do. So let me start with my own summer, because I got close to being the cautionary tale. We moved, the whole family, to Stockholm, and we moved the business at the same time. On paper, we had planned it carefully. We thought about logistics, we thought about timing, and the handover of things that needed, well, handing over. What I had not accounted for was how much detailed attention a move like that takes from you. The boxes, they were the easy part. It was the 101 small, unfamiliar decisions that come with a new location, each one individually trivial, yet collectively enormous. Which authority to register with, and in what order. How the school year actually works here, where you buy the thing you've bought without thinking for the last 7 years. Marmite, in my case, in case you're wondering. I'm still looking for some. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I took what I told myself was a holiday. It was short, and I came out of it at speed, straight back into business, continuing through my list. It honestly didn't feel like a mistake at the time. It felt responsible. There was a great deal to do. I was the person to do it, and every hour I spent working was an hour of visible progress against a real backlog. What saved me was my wife, and it was unplanned, at least not in detail and not ahead of time. We booked a last-minute week in the Swedish mountains. Sunshine, which is not a guarantee in this country, long days outside, and enough distance from the desk that my brain eventually stopped spinning on tasks that felt like more open loops than I could actually hold at a time. And around the same time, I had stepped back from LinkedIn. I kept posting, but I stopped swimming in it. A few weeks without the fire hose of everybody else's thinking arriving in my head before breakfast. And it was in that week, out of the noise, that I could see the year more clearly, the direction of it, what was working in the business, what I had been avoiding, what I wanted the last 4 months of the year to contain. I came home with a small number of clear thoughts that I really could not have produced at my desk in August, however many hours I had tried to put into it. That week was tiny compared to everything around it, and yet it changed the angle I came in on. Now, there's an analogy in this that I've been using, and it comes straight from spaceflight. See, when a spacecraft comes home, the most dangerous phase of the whole journey is the return, what's called reentry, when the craft itself comes in to the atmosphere. Because it's traveling at something like 27,000 kilometers an hour, which if you're in miles an hour is about 17,000 miles an hour. And all of that energy has to go somewhere before the craft can arrive safely. And the bit that I find interesting that makes it a fun comparison, right? It cannot use its engines to slow down. Right? Carrying enough fuel to brake from orbital speeds would make the whole vehicle impossibly heavy and, well, impossible. So what it does is it uses the atmosphere instead. It flies into thickening air, the atmosphere, and it's the friction that does the work. The energy is bled off as heat. Now, what determines whether that works is the angle at which the craft comes down at, the angle of descent. And there's a narrow band of acceptable entry angles. And this is what space engineers call the entry corridor. If you come in too steep and the heat builds up and the deceleration happens all at once, then the vehicle arrives faster than it can survive. If you come in too shallow, then there's a risk that the craft skips off the top of the atmosphere like a stone skimming off water. And in that situation, the craft either fails to arrive at all, or it arrives much later, probably in a different place than was planned for. Two ways to miss, both of them fails. And the angle is set way before the craft reaches the thick air. By the time the heat starts building up, that geometry of the arrival has already been fixed. It's already been decided. There is a small burn right at the top of the descent. It's almost nothing compared to the energy of everything that follows, and that's what commits it. And that is what my week in the mountains turned out to be. A small burn at the top that set the angle. And I think most of us come back into work too steep. We hit the thick air of the first week at full speed and we try to power through it, and the heat load is real. The overwhelm in that first week has a cause, and the cause is the angle we chose before we came back in. And there's a reason that this matters more now than it does in January. Right? Late August is a genuine restart. Most of us feel it whether or not we have children in the house. Right? That's when the school year begins. But for anyone in retail, you're planning for Black Friday and the Christmas peak is already well underway, which means that the shape of the second half of the year is being decided in these few weeks. Most of the sporting calendar starts a new season about now after whatever the summer's major tournament happened to be. And in most other industries, this is when conferences are happening. There's all sorts of reasons why this part of the year is critical. The calendar we actually live by has a sort of new year here, which brings me to resolutions and to believe that I hold quite strongly. This is a far better moment to make them, resolutions, than the 1st of January. The reason for that? Well, that's evidence. In January, we're guessing. We're at the start of a new year that we've not experienced yet. We're making commitments about a version of ourselves we are imagining when everybody else is making commitments about themselves too, with a fortnight of festive food and very little contact with our actual work behind us. And the resolution, kind of aspirational, polite way of saying invented. Right now, though, we've got 8 months of data behind us. We know how this year has actually gone. We know what the goals are for the rest of this year. We know which quarter went sideways and why. We know which relationship at the exec table has been quietly expensive, which part of the platform generated most of the interruptions, which recurring meeting we have resented every week since March, and which of our people has grown faster than the org chart expected or acknowledged. And this makes now a different kind of commitment. It's almost like a diagnostic. Right? We already know what needs to change, and most of us have known since, well, roughly May at least. It also comes with something else that January never has, which is a real deadline 4 months out and a business already moving towards it. Also, unlike in January when everyone comes back at once, generally over the summer break, different people stagger their vacations, meaning that your landing is rarely going to coincide with everyone else's. Just a few people usually, giving you more leeway at this time of year to focus on you and your goals. So why do so many of us come in steep when we know how it ends? Let's get clear about one thing first. The pile of work is real, right? Nobody invented it just to test us. Those decisions that we had genuinely were deferred. That project genuinely is late, and the person who covered genuinely does need their afternoon back and their break. So when we go straight at it on the first morning, we're responding to something true and valid. The steep angle is also the one our whole career has trained us for. Most of us arrived in this role by being the person who could absorb load. That was a skill that got us noticed as engineers and then as leaders. Volume in, volume out, reliably under pressure. It's a real competence, and it's deeply satisfying to exercise. There is a particular pleasure in a Tuesday where you closed 40 things and got them done. And there's another reason. which is actually harder to admit. Going straight at the queue means we never have to decide what matters, because the queue decides for us. Every item in it presents itself as, well, urgent, so we can work 11 hours straight without making any more judgment calls about priority than we absolutely have to, and still feel we've done a good full day of leadership. But the cost of that is quite specific. Steep reentry still produces output because most of us are competent enough to deliver under load and not burn up to a crisp. But what it destroys is the small number of decisions that only we could have made, because those decisions are never the loudest thing in the queue. They sit quietly underneath 40 items that are shouting just as loud as everything else. So here's the alternative way of looking at it. That heavy, sluggish, faintly humiliating feeling of the first week back is the work being done. The friction is what slows us to a survivable speed. A spacecraft cannot brake with its engines. It has to fly into thickening air and let the drag take the energy out. And that phase is uncomfortable and hot. And from the outside, kind of looks like nothing's being achieved. And so our instinct in that first week, when it feels slow, is to add power. We start earlier, we take the calls, we clear the lists, we read the discomfort as evidence that we are behind, and we respond by increasing speed, which increases the heat, which increases the sense of being behind. And I've talked on this show before about, orientation, about how effort applied to that position gives you well-efficient confusion. And the first week back is one of the sharpest versions of this that I know, because it is the 1 week of the year when our position has genuinely changed and we haven't checked it. Not yet. We've been away. Things moved while we were gone. Our own perspective moved too. Arriving at speed guarantees that we'd never take a bearing. And our teams are doing their own re-entry at their own angles, at their own times. And some of them are away and are coming back to the same thick air we are. Some never left, have been holding things together while being gone and are waiting to be asked what happened. Some of us are back with a piece of clarity of their own, and they're not certain that anybody wants to hear that in week one. Coming in steep means we process all of that as the same volume of noise. So this is where we get interactive. So if you're out walking or you're between meetings, just hold on to this question. Otherwise, I really encourage you to write it down. Write down your answer to this question, because we're going to come back to it. Right? Which way do you come in? What's your re-entry? Steep, so you burn fast, or shallow, so that you sort of take it easy but risk skipping off the surface a couple of times before you properly descend? Most of us know immediately. And if you think honestly about the last 3 or 4 returns to work from the summer, from Christmas, from parental leave, from a fortnight off in May, there'll be a pattern there that you can look at. But having said that, don't rush the answer and try not to pick the flattering one. I want to tell you now about a CTO I was coaching a couple of years ago. I've changed some of the details, but the essence is there. So he ran an engineering team at a modest-sized company, 3 teams, with an established VP engineering underneath him. Before his summer holiday, he had a long list of things that he knew he could not reach all of. So he did what most of us would do, which is to cram in everything that could be crammed in and defer the rest of it. Decisions, a couple of projects, some actions that needed his name on them. He handed the operational side to his VP engineering and went away for his fortnight of holiday. He also happened to book a coaching session with me for his second day back because he was being efficient. And I thought it was a good sign. Turned out to matter more than either of us had expected. So you see, 2 things happened while he was away. The first is that his deferred pile sat there waiting patiently for him. And the second is that his VP of engineering, who had carried everything for 2 weeks, handed all of it back to him, lump sum, on his first morning back, and then promptly went on holiday himself, like literally that afternoon. I mean, this is the hot potato being passed in its purest form. So he arrived to his own deferred stack, plus everything that accumulated on top of it, and the one person who understood the current state of it had just left the building for a couple of weeks off. So he went straight at it. Then in our session on day 2, he told me something that he had worked out while he was away. He was not sure exactly when this thought had arrived on the last day or on the flight home. At some point after he'd actually genuinely relaxed, he had seen that the engineering organization needed to be 4 teams rather than 3, and that one of his senior people was probably ready to be promoted to lead that new team. Good decision. It was also, and this is the bit that really matters, the only item on his entire list that would have made the list shorter. Everything else on that stack consumed his time, energy, effort, and focus. That was the one thing that created capacity because it gave him somebody to delegate to, and it rebalanced the work across the rest of the organization. Going from 3 teams to 4 is a modest move when you already run 3 teams with a leadership layer that works. The pattern exists and that cost is small. Or at least it would have been. He did not act on it. He went back into the stack and he worked, and it was sort of 2 or 3 weeks before he came up for air. And we recall that conversation in a later session because I had written the thought down on our shared coaching notes. He had not written it anywhere. And that was the detail that stayed with me for a couple of years, right? The insight existed. It had been spoken out loud to another person. It was recorded. And it still very nearly disappeared because nothing was done with it in the week when doing something with it was cheap and would have been incredibly effective. What he said when we recalled it was this: if only I had done that visibly straight away when I got back, some of these other things would not have been so distracting. Think about that for a moment, right? His clearest thinking about the shape of his organization arrived at the exact point of his greatest distance from it, on a mountain or on a plane, out of the noise. And then he descended into thick air at speed, and the view and the clarity went with it. That's the thing about altitude. You can see furthest at the moment you are furthest away. And the descent takes the view from you, and it takes it within days. So let's make this practical then. So here's the playbook, and I'm calling it the controlled reentry. 4 steps, deliberately in this order from the inside out. Right? The first 2 happen in your own head. The last 2, they're visible to everyone else. 1, name your angle. You did this a few minutes ago, right? Too steep, too shallow, just spot on. If you run steep, your risk is the heat load, and your discipline is choosing before the cue chooses for you, right? If you run shallow, your risk is a return that never quite completes, where you're physically back in September and still deferring the same 3 decisions in October, right? The remedy is different in each case. So know which one you are. Name your angle. 2, write down the view before the atmosphere thickens. Right? If you're still away, or if you have a weekend between now and your first day back, this is going to be the most valuable half hour available to you. Write down what you can see from up there. What is working? What have you been avoiding? What you want the last 4 months of this year to contain? Who in your organization has grown faster than your org chart has noticed? Write it on your own list, in your own words. Whether that is in a paper notebook or a productivity app, it doesn't matter. It just needs to be the list that you keep coming back to so that you see it. Date it. The date will help you when you look back to see how clear and accurate your view from altitude was, so you can calibrate yourself for next time. Also, keep it raw. Right? The second it starts looking like a document or a note or a memo to yourself, it's become work, and it will join the queue with everything else. Keep it raw. So why is this step in the playbook at all? Well, remember the CTO in that story? He had the insight. He said it out loud, had it written down by somebody else, and he still lost it. The coachees I work with who make this kind of insight stick, they're the ones who reach for their own notes in the middle of a coaching session and write the thought down themselves. I've seen pen and paper. I've seen switching to an app. I've seen switching to a different computer. The version of your insight that survives is the one that you captured in your way. Write down the view before the atmosphere thickens. 3, take one action that creates capacity. Make it visible and do it before you touch the queue. This is the significant step, right? On your first day back, before you open the stack, take exactly one action from that list you wrote with a view from altitude. 2 tests for choosing it. Does it create capacity or consume it. Almost everything waiting for you consumes. You're looking for the item that gives you back time or people or clarity. It could be a promotion. It could be a team split. It could be a cancellation. It could be a decision that unblocks 3 other things. It could be a conversation you've been avoiding that is currently costing you an hour every week. Second criteria, can other people see it? An action that nobody notices will not reset how the organization reads your return. Your team is watching how you come back with more attention than you probably realize, because your manner in that first week tells them what the autumn is going to be like. A visible decision on day 1 is worth a fortnight of invisible effort. The CTO in that story had an action sitting in his notes on day 2 that passed both tests. Almost nothing else on his list passed either. Take one action that creates capacity and make it visible. 4, sequence what remains rather than just absorbing it. Now is the time to open the stack, right? Treat it as a queue to be ordered rather than a mass to be cleaned up, right? What genuinely had to wait for you and what only needs a decision from you so that somebody else can move. What has quietly expired while you're away and can just simply be closed. What was urgent 3 weeks ago and is now just late, which is a different and much calmer thing to manage. One warning here though, the queue will try to convince you that every item in it is really step 3. Test is capacity. Step 3 gives you back to you and the queue takes it away. If you find yourself doing step 3 11 times on the first morning, you've gone straight into it. Just you've got a different vocabulary for describing your queue, right? So step 4, sequence what remains rather than just absorbing it. If this sounds like you and you're heading back into work in the next week or 2, that page of insight from altitude is so important. Write the view down while you can still see it. So let's pull all these thoughts together then. The most dangerous phase of the journey is the return. The angle we come in on is set before we reach the thick air by something small at the top that commits us. Most of us come in too steep because the steep angle looks responsible and lets the queue make our decisions for us. And the heaviness of that first week is the friction doing its job, which means adding power probably makes it worse. We can see furthest at the moment we are furthest away, and the descent takes that view away from us within days, sometimes hours. So we write it down while we still have it. And on the first morning, we act once, visibly, on the thing that makes everything else smaller. One more thought before we go today. That CTO was fine. The company was fine. The team split happened eventually, and the person got promoted to be a new leader. But what the CTO lost was 4 months of wading through detail, and the version of his autumn where he was leading instead of catching up. That was lost too. 4 months is most of what is left of this year. The angle matters more than the fuel you power yourself in with. If your summer was genuinely restorative, great, use it. And if your summer was a house move or a hard quarter or a holiday that was too short and finished too fast, the angle is still yours to choose. And it is worth more than the energy you come home with. Now, if any of this sounds familiar and you'd rather work on it with some structure rather than spending another year figuring it out the hard way, that is what I do. You can explore the coaching and the cohorts at thectoplaybook.com, built to help you develop your own playbook for your path at your pace. If this episode is useful, the most helpful thing you can do is send it to one person who is heading back to work this week, because they're inside the exact window where choosing the angle is still cheap and the view is still beautiful. Until then, take the half hour, write the page, and choose your one thing. Keep leading with clarity. Thank you for listening to the whole episode. I appreciate your time, so just before you go, I'd like to ask you for a favor in return for putting together this episode of the CTO Playbook for you. Please share the episode with just one person who will appreciate it. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or another platform, sharing the episode will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great content. Remember that you can find more information on the CTOplaybook.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.